we read our scripture this morning, I wanted to give you just a little bit of context of why I picked Galatians to be the text for this sermon series on good vibrations. And I didn't know it, but I got a pretty good picture of why this morning at our young adult Sunday school class when we had a guest speaker from the Sikh temple here in town. Nikki, remind me of her name. Sudha Chopra. And she was telling us that, so Sikhism is a religion that emerged in India and emerged in the 15th century during the time at which Islam and Hindu were at each other's throats. And they were caught, and the people that lived in that part of India were caught in the crossfire. And so their very first guru he was a young man that both sides respected him, but one day he went into the river and he was gone for 5 days. And when he came back, the first words out of his mouth were, "There is no Muslim and there is no Hindu. There are only people." And that is how Sikhism began to emerge. Now, something very much like that happened to the Apostle Paul on the Damascus Road. You've probably heard of it as his Damascus Road conversion experience. There's one version of that story, well, actually there's 3 versions of that story in the book of Acts as Luke tells us what happened, and then there's Paul's own version, which we find in the letter to the Galatians, which is going to be our text for these next several weeks, where he tells again about this experience. The bottom line is that something happened to Paul on that road, not unlike what happened to the first Sikh guru when he went into that river, and that is that when Paul came up off that road, he had a whole new look on life. He experienced a vibe on that road that changed everything for him and the people around him. And so, what happens here in Galatians is that he has heard that since he's left Galatia, since he's left those churches, that he got started there with this new message of his, that there is no Jew or Greek, there is no Roman or Galatian, there is no male or female. Some of those vibes that he left in Galatia have gotten mixed up. There are some rumors going around about him and what really happened to him on that Damascus Road and what kind of message he really had. And not only is Paul's integrity at stake, but his message is at stake, or God's message is at stake. And so he writes this letter to the Galatians to set the record straight. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pick up in the first chapter of Galatians, not with verse 1, but with verse 11, right after Paul has blasted the Galatians for believing all these false rumors. And this is what he says, starting in verse 11 and following. So if you want to follow along in your real Bible, or I shouldn't say real Bible, your paper Bible, you can do that. If you want to follow along on the screen, or if you have your smartphone or tablet, or whatever electronic device, you're welcome to look up Galatians 1, verses 11 through 24, and follow along with me. For I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel that was proclaimed by me is not of human origin. For I did not receive it from a human source, nor was I taught it, but I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ. You have heard, no doubt, of my earlier life in Judaism. I was violently persecuting the church of God and was trying to destroy it. I was advanced in Judaism beyond many among my people of the same age, for I was far more zealous for the traditions of my ancestors. But when God, who had set me apart before I was born and called me through His grace, was pleased to reveal His Son to me, so that I might proclaim Him among the Gentiles, meaning non-Jews. I did not confer with any human being, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were already apostles before me, but I went away at once into Arabia, and afterwards I returned to Damascus. Then after 3 years I did go up to Jerusalem to visit Cephas, Peter, and stayed with him 15 days. But I did not see any other apostle except James, the Lord's brother. In what I am writing to you before God, I do not lie. Then I went into the regions of Syria and Cilicia. And I was still unknown by sight to the churches of Judea that are in Christ. They only heard it said, the one who formerly was persecuting us is now proclaiming the faith he once tried to destroy. And they glorified God because of me. The Word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
By the way, just a little aside, thank you to my husband David, who's able to be here with us this morning. If you're new to Twin Pines, David actually is on staff at Second Presbyterian Church here in town, and he gets one Sunday a month off, and today he agreed to spend it with us so that he could play Wipeout for us. So thank you, David.
The Presbyterians are surprisingly not open to that.
As I mentioned in our last series, we disciples are just renegade Presbyterians. Now, I also bring up David because I was telling him about this series and I was telling him about this text, and I read this to him yesterday. We were talking, and the part where Paul says, let's see, in what I am writing to you before God, I do not lie. My husband, David, the minister, said, you know, when somebody says to you, I'm not lying, what's the first thing that you think? They're lying. That's the context of what's going on here. Paul has got to defend himself because there's all these different perceptions of who he is and what he's about. Now, yesterday morning, I opened my Twitter feed and see this breaking news from Religion News Service. Muhammad Ali, boxing legend, pop icon, Muslim pathbreaker, dead at 74. And then I proceeded to read about Muhammad Ali and read many different articles about him yesterday, setting the record straight about who he was and who he wasn't. Now, I was so struck by the first two paragraphs of this article in the Religious News Service that I have to share them with you now, because I had done all this study on Paul and I was blown away at the parallelisms that came about. So listen, humor me a moment. When boxing star Cassius Clay declared himself a member of the controversial Nation of Islam back in 1964 and demanded to be called by his new name, Muhammad Ali, he shocked the world of sports and rattled a nation already struggling with social unrest over civil rights and the Vietnam War. But Ali's conversion also launched a pilgrimage of faith that would take him from the fringes of Islam through its orthodox heart, and from a virtual pariah to a global ambassador for faith, his own and others, as the key to peace. For this legendary African-American athlete from the South, it was a journey spurred by the enduring racial injustice that America was only beginning to address, and it was one that presaged important religious changes and tensions that continue today. Now, I'll encourage you to go and read the rest of the article, but I'm here to tell you, I read those first two paragraphs, and I had just studied immensely Galatians and Paul, and I thought to myself, that could have been written about the Apostle Paul. The same could be said for the Apostle Paul, who, by the way, was not born Paul. Just like Muhammad Ali was not born Muhammad Ali, was born Cassius Marcellus Clay, Paul was born Saul. Paul also changed his name. Paul also changed his identity given to him by birth because of his faith, his newfound faith. Paul also launched a pilgrimage of faith that would take him from the end of the religious spectrum, from one end of the religious spectrum to the other, and everywhere in between. As a matter of fact, even birthing a new religion, which I personally don't believe was his intention. I truly see him, like Jesus, as a reformer of Judaism, not the founder of a new religion. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. So I read this and I thought this could also be Paul, who would become a global ambassador for faith, both his native Judaism as well as the Gentile Christianity that was being birthed by his very presence. He was a global ambassador for Judaism and Christianity to coexist, and he saw this as a key to peace in the world as he knew it, which at that time pretty much was divided into Jews and Gentiles, Romans and everybody else. Read the book of Romans and you'll know exactly what I mean. A lot of people think Paul rejected Judaism. Read Romans 9, 10, and 11, find out. So much to my surprise, as I pondered upon this, I realized that the world as Paul knew it had much in common with the world that Muhammad Ali grew up in and live in now. You see, what my study proved to me is why these first two paragraphs resonated so completely with what I had learned of Paul is when I thought about it, Galatia, which you'll see on the postcard and on the series graphic, Galatia's in modern-day Turkey, right in the middle. Galatia was a Roman province during the Roman Empire, but Galatians were Romans. You know where the word Galatia comes from? Where that comes from? It comes from the word Gaul. G-A-U-L. Not gallbladder, Gaul, like France. Gaul, like Celtic peoples. Gaul, like Gaelic. As people migrated from northern England and France toward the south, they skipped over Italy and came down through Macedonia and to Turkey, to modern-day Turkey. Galatians are descendants of Gaul's Gallic people. And guess what? If you know your Roman history, you know what Gallic peoples were to Romans? Barbarians. A people to be conquered. A terrorist people. Savage. Only purpose, the only existence that Rome could see for Galatian people was that they be conquered and that they serve Rome, particularly in the army. They were given Roman names, expected to abide by Roman social customs, expected to serve in the Roman army, and above all to worship the Roman emperor. So when the Apostle Paul shows up preaching good news of Jesus Christ to these conquered Galatians, that they are now free under the one lordship of Jesus Christ, not Caesar, and that they have a new citizenship in God's kingdom, not Rome, I think it wasn't all that unlike what happened to Muhammad Ali when he heard how the Nation of Islam could free him from the racial injustice he was experiencing from white Christians. Now, we could spend all day going off on different tangents about what the Nation of Islam was or wasn't. I don't want to argue about that. What I want to talk about is Muhammad Ali's experience. He heard something new that helped him to experience some freedom in himself. And I found this out by watching a little video that was included at the bottom of the article I read in the religious news service. And I'd love to show you the whole video, but in the interest of time, we're only going to watch the last half of it. Brooke's going to pull it up here in just a second. By the way, thank you to Brooke. Yes, very nicely. The video is entitled, "Why is Jesus White?" And Muhammad Ali is explaining his experience of the white culture that he grew up in Louisville in the 1950s. This is his Olympic gold medal came in 1960. So he was growing up in the 50s. He was born in 1942. So the 50s and the 60s were his growing up years. And this part of the interview, he's telling what happened right after he won his Olympic gold medal and the experience that he had and why the Nation of Islam teachings became so important to him. Brooke?
I thought I invented something. I said, man, I know I'm going to get my people freedom now. I'm the champion of the whole world, Olympic champion. I know I can eat downtown now. And I went downtown that day, had my little medal on, went to restaurants. At that time, black things weren't integrated. Black folks couldn't eat downtown. And I went downtown, I sat down, and I said, a cup of coffee, hot dog. He said, the lady said, we don't serve Negroes. I'm so mad. I said, I don't eat them either. Just give me a cup. I'm the Olympic gold medal. 3 days ago, I fought for this country in Rome. I won the gold medal, and I'm going to eat. The manager heard her tell the manager, and he said, well, I'm not the man that he's got to go out. I didn't know he's going to put me out. And I had to leave that restaurant in my hometown where I went to church and served in their Christianity and fought and daddy fought in World Wars. Just wanted to go in. They couldn't eat downtown. I said, something's wrong. No, I've been to Moscow.
Yes, I was going to ask you about what attracted you to the
truth. The teachings of Elijah Muhammad on how black people's been brainwashed, how they've been taught to love white and hate black, how we've been robbed of our names in slavery, we were robbed of our culture, we were robbed of our true history, so it left us a walking dead man. So you got black people in all white country, and they don't know nothing about themselves, they don't speak the language, they're just mentally dead. And this is happening all over the world. But the first place that will rise will be the black people in America, and then the rest of them will. I was one who heard the truth. And when I heard the truth about my name was not Cassius Clay, I know a black man in America named John Hawkins. Now, you know who John Hawkins was. He was a slave trader in England. But the white people at that time, one had 5 slaves, and his name was Jones. They would be called Jones property. If you was auctioned off to Mr. Smith, your name is Smith. Identifying you as property of certain masters. So now that I'm free, now that I'm no longer a slave, then I want the name of my ancestors. Muhammad Ali. Like a Chinese, how would Chinese look named Robert Smith? How would a German look named Edward Goldberg? Jewish name. So when I heard that we don't have our names, we don't speak our true Arabic language, we're robbed of Islam, our true religion, and we've been made deaf, dumb, and blind in slavery, and Elijah Muhammad was taught by Allah, who we refer to as God, to teach us the truth that will free us. And when I heard it, I've been free ever since. I have no racial problems. I don't go where I'm not wanted. I'm proud, and Islam did it. So, and after these things that I heard in church and preaching and watching this and that, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint it. But as soon as I heard the truth that Elijah Muhammad teaches us in America, it made me accept it.
I have to tell you, I find it mind-boggling that I did not know Muhammad Ali's full story until his death on Friday. I knew he was a great boxer, to be sure. But because he became a Muslim and took a Muslim name, that's all that anybody wanted me to know about him. You see, I grew up in Texas, in the South, in the 1970s, in the 1980s. And I remember the snide way people would say, well, yeah, he's a great boxer, but, he's a Muslim. Or he thinks he's a Muslim. My favorite is the eye roll. Yep, anybody got that in your family? The eye roll accompanied by the blanket's criticism. Well, he's just one of those weirdos. Now look, I know he's not a saint. I know he's not perfect. I know he had a big mouth that got him in a lot of trouble, and that he had contradictions and inconsistencies in his own mind, the way that we all do. I think that's why he changed his mind over time as he grew as a person. What am I interested in? And what I can't believe I didn't know is that this man discovered a faith that liberated him and others who he felt were oppressed by the faith of his birth, Christianity. And when he discovered this faith that liberated him, he lived by it. And it wasn't just lip service. If you know his story at all, you know it cost him personally. It cost him his titles. It cost him 4 years in the prime of his career as a professional boxer. said Ali's faith pilgrimage was a journey spurred by the enduring racial injustice that America was only beginning to address, and it was one that presaged important religious changes and tensions that continue today. And it's funny because you could say the same thing about the Apostle Paul. I don't know exactly what happened on the Damascus Road. All I know is that what happened on the Damascus Road to Paul didn't stay on the Damascus Road, just like what happened to Muhammad Ali didn't stay simply with Muhammad Ali. Now, unlike Ali, Paul himself was not an oppressed person or a member of the underclass. Now, he was a Jew, and Jews were despised by Romans, but he was also a Roman citizen. And that brought him great privilege. And as a Jew, he was a leader among leaders. As he describes himself, a Pharisee among Pharisees. He was in the upper crust, the cream of the crop, the aristocracy. He was among the haves, not the have-nots. And Paul, who was born Saul of Tarsus, had a good thing going. Unlike Muhammad Ali, Paul had a good thing going. He didn't need to change what he believed or how he lived. But because of what happened on the Damascus Road, he did. And it wasn't just a little change, it was a big change. You see, whatever happened on the Damascus Road, Paul couldn't go back to living the way that he'd been living. And the way that he would have been living was as if his life and the lives of people like him were the only lives that mattered. That's why he was persecuting Jesus' followers. That's why he was persecuting Gentiles. I don't know what happened on the Damascus Road, but when I think about it, it's almost like I could hear God say to Saul, Saul, it's not about you. Other people matter besides you. Other people matter besides people like you. That's what my whole Jesus movement is all about. Jewish lives matter, yes. But Syrian lives matter too. And so do Cilician lives, and African lives, and Galatian lives, and Spanish lives, even Roman lives, Paul, they matter. So get off your high horse and tell them. And if you ever see any pictures of Paul on the Damascus Road, get on Google and Google Images, you know what you're going to see? Paul falling off his horse. Getting off his high horse. His whole worldview looks completely different from the ground than it did up on top of that horse. And here's the kicker. Paul could have just gone home to Tarsus, gone home to his mama, and said, Mama, I had a really weird dream. Can I have some milk and cookies? He could have just gone on. He didn't have to tell anybody that happened. He could have gone on with his life as it was, not giving it another thought. And look, if he was really converted by Jesus and had this big Jesus experience, he could have gone to Jerusalem. There was already a big Jesus thing going on there. He didn't have to start something new. He could have gone there, hooked up with Peter and James and all the Jerusalem disciples. Everything would have been neat and clean. He wouldn't have to fool with all this Gentile business. But he didn't do that. That's why I say that I don't think he was about a new religion. If he wanted a new religion, he would have started one on his own. What he did was a little bit of both. He went to non-Jews in Damascus of Syria first. And then he went to Jerusalem and talked to Peter and James. And he struck a deal with them that he would go to the non-Jews and they would go to the Jews. And then after that, he went on back to modern-day Turkey, to Cilicia and Galatia, and he began to tell the good news. And so what happened on the Damascus Road didn't stop with Paul. It changed the world. It presaged an important religious change and tensions that continue today. crazy as it might have seemed at the time, what happened is that Paul picked up some kind of vibe on that Damascus road. A good vibe. A good vibe that made him believe the world could be different. A good vibe that told him he wouldn't have to go out and kill these people who were different from him, but that maybe they could find a way to work it out together. A good vibe that said this world could be not Jew and Gentile, not Roman and Galatian, not male and female, not slave and free. A good vibe that said this world could just be one world, under one Lord, not Caesar, but the lordship of God's love taught to us through Jesus of Nazareth, where every person of any descent is a brother and a sister to Jesus Christ, and therefore all children of God in the same family. And when Paul began to share this good vibe with other people, one of two things happened. It's kind of like what happened with Muhammad Ali. Either people love it or they hate it. What the haters didn't know, and what I think the haters still don't know, is the thing about good vibrations is that people pick up good vibrations. I'm picking up good vibrations. People pick up good vibrations. Good vibrations can't be stopped. Now, I know bad vibrations have a way of being picked up too, but what I've learned is that the good vibrations in this good news are louder, they sound longer, they're happier, they got a better beat, and people can dance to it. That's why this has endured, despite all of our humans screwing it up. We just spent 3 weeks discovering our heritage as the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. A movement for wholeness in a fragmented world. A movement that said, let's get rid of all this human religion and let's just get back to the good vibrations that are right here in the good news. That's why this has endured, and that's why I spend my time as a preacher, and that's why this place matters. Our world is sick of bad vibes. They're everywhere. And the only way to get rid of bad vibes is to have more good vibes than you got bad. So I'm asking, are you picking up some good vibrations in this place? What are your good vibrations? Would you pray with me? God, we thank you for your love, because it is stronger than our hate and our difference. We thank you for those who have tapped into the good vibration of that love and have called us to share that good news. Our world is hurting, God, because of racism and because of terrorism, because of hatred, because of inequity, because of injustice, because people are being people, or at least letting the worst part of their peopleness get in the way of the good part, the love part. Help us, Lord, to keep those good vibrations going. In the name of the one who shared those good vibrations with us and taught us the good news, Jesus Christ our Lord. Pray. As we sing our prayer song, you're invited, if you want, to light a candle or to just go back to the prayer box back here. Maybe there's somebody or something in this world that needs some good vibrations and you'd like our prayer team to pray for it. something going on here in Lexington or in your life, you don't need to put your name on it, but go to our prayer box, light a candle, or just stay in your seat and talk to Jesus. Have a little talk with Jesus, and you'll have some good conversations.